another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 22. And this week, another exciting guest. For the listeners out there, this podcast has been about how everyone has their own path. There's no individual right path. There's not one set in stone that makes you get to where you want to go in life. And I think this guy is a perfect example. He's been through a lot throughout his career. If you look on paper, I don't think it would emulate to where he's been, and he's been able to overcome a lot of obstacles along the way to get to where he is now, playing pro hockey in Germany. He's been over there for some time. Also been through a lot recently and some health stuff, including concussions, and I think that's an important topic today that a lot of young kids need to be educated on. But first, let's get to our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Steven Deeg.
Thanks for having me, Hersey. Appreciate it.
I'm happy you could come on, and yeah, obviously we have a lot to talk about today. But first, let's go back to the beginning. You were born in Ajax, Ontario. Is that where you first kind of learned to put the skates on and fall in love with the game of hockey?
Yeah, I was actually born at Scarborough Centenary Hospital. But yeah, my family, my mom and dad, we lived in Ajax right away in the South End. And then I actually started playing hockey when I was probably about 3 years old. My dad was obviously super into hockey. I mean, he loved it as a kid. He actually never ended up got to play as a kid. Kind of a funny story. It was actually because he was in German school during his childhood growing up. So my Oma and Opa, or my grandma and grandpa, never allowed him to play hockey, whereas some of his buddies like had equipment, and they were playing in like a rec league, or whether it was, at the time, I don't know if it would have been like single A or double A or triple A at the time in Scarborough. So my dad always just played road hockey growing up, and he played a ton of other sports. And then probably when I was about 2 or 3 years old, my dad actually had me in skates. And he would actually, growing up, there was like old pictures he would go through where he would literally just put me in the high chair in the net, and I would kind of be like the goalie, and he would just joke around and shoot a tennis ball or whatever in the net, or I would just sit there, watch him play. And then actually, once I was able to walk and move pretty good, he got me a pair of skates. And I still remember, like, when I was 3, well, not so much remember, but I mean, there's videos, where him and my Opa, my grandpa, they would take me down to Ajax Community Center, and I would skate around with one of those, I forget what they were called, like those red, you know what I mean? Like the
Mm-hmm.
pushers they have, and I would
Yeah.
use those to skate around. And then pretty much from there, I fell in love with it. I would play, when I was 4 or 5, I would play Timbits hockey. A couple of my best friends to this day, I played Timbits hockey with, like in Ajax. Yeah, and then that's basically how it started. And then pretty much, all the way through, I kept playing, and I was good to lucky enough to play at a high level growing up. And I was good enough. And yeah, it was pretty much my dad and my Opa pretty much got me into it. My mom's a big hockey fan as well. But my dad's been a hugely fan and hockey fan his whole life. So I still remember I was born in the year 93. And it was a kind of a funny story. Like, my dad used to have this old VHS tape of the Leafs playoff run in 93, when they went through like the Red Wings, the Blues, and then eventually lost to the Kings. But my dad used to always tell me the story. He'd be holding me in his hand, or like I'd be sitting in a laundry basket watching the game. And when Gilmore, I think it was against the Blues, he scored that wraparound goal in overtime to win. He said he dropped me like right on my head, basically, or just dropped me in the laundry basket because he was screaming so loud. So I mean, that's kind of like the start of my upbringing, basically with hockey, where I learned to play. Obviously I had great, parental support from my dad, and especially my Opa too. My Opa, like I said, for my Opa, I mean, my dad never got to play. So for him to see me in skates and stuff like that, I think it was a blast for him, growing up, for my parents and him as well.
Yeah, it normally always starts with your parents getting you involved, or in this case too, like your opa, your grandpa was also very into it as well. And that story about the Gilmore, I mean, that year, obviously Kerry Fraser, that was a penalty, but
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I still remember the VHS tape. I want to see if I can find it. It's probably too old now. It's probably on YouTube, but I used to watch that video religiously. It was just about their playoff run.
would have been
Yeah, it was
crazy,
awesome.
man, because they were in the West
Yeah,
back then. So it would have been them versus Montreal in the final, which
I
would have been
know
insane.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
But
absolutely.
no, so back to you then. So as you said, you obviously your parents, your dad and your opa would take you to the rink at a young age. You'd skate around with those little helper things, like whatever they're called. I forget the name as well. In Germany, they're
Yeah,
the penguins
the
always, like the little
Penguins.
penguins you hold on to.
Yeah.
But and then you said like you were able to kind of continue like once you got into Timmets and stuff, you just kept like enjoying the game and obviously were a good player. And then so your minor hockey path then was it strictly the whole time you stayed with Ajax Pickering and just kind of worked your way up through the AAA system there?
So yeah, so probably when I was about after Timbits, when I was 6 or 7, they actually had select hockey in Ajax. So I would play like it was like 6-year-old select, 7-year-old select for the Ajax Knights. And those years I was like above and beyond like one of the better players in the league. I think I was a little bit bigger than everyone, could skate better than everyone. And even that first year of AAA when I was 8 years old, and I think it was like minor novice, I was, one of the best players. Um, and that year was interesting actually because that was the first year of AAA, and we weren't very good that year. And I still remember my dad coming in to talk to me for that next year, that novice year, I believe, or yeah, it would have been novice. And he said, "Hey, like let's try and go to the city and play in the GTHL for a year and see what happens." And I think that's what happens a lot nowadays too. Even, when I played, a lot of kids, move back and forth. But then it was a big like a process. Like you basically had to, I believe, get your release from the city. So I ended up getting my release from Ajax and then going to the city, and I played for the Wexford Raiders my 9-year-old AAA year. And then that year, I think that would have been novice. That was just like not a good year of hockey. We weren't very good. I didn't really fit in well. It was different too. It was like driving. All the games were in the city, which was fine. It was easier to travel for my parents. I mean, I don't blame them, but unfortunately, that year just didn't work out too great for me. And then there was actually a couple of us that left that year from Ajax, like some of the top better players. A couple guys went to Markham Islanders or other teams, and then it was crazy actually. The year after, right away, the next year, I came right back to Ajax, and so did the other guys that left too. And then basically from novice, from 10 years old till I was about, I guess, 16 years old, draft year, I played for the Ajax Pickering Raiders all the way AAA. So I mean, I was always, and that's kind of when that age, I think, like, I dominated. It was kind of funny. I really dominated from an age like 6 to 10. And then after that, I was obviously a good player in the league, but I wasn't like a top player. So it was kind of funny. Like everyone kind of, kind of caught up to me a little bit, got to my height, my speed, my skill level and everything. But it was funny, minor hockey, in Ajax Pickering, our team was always okay, pretty good, but we still had a lot of guys like in the city and guys coming in. So like every year it was interesting. We got better and better, and we started competing with, the York Simcoes, who have a huge draw, Quinty Red Devils, the Markham Waxers, the Barrie Colts, these teams. And then pretty much by the time we got to like 15 and 16 years old, we were like one of the best teams, like by far, like maybe like top 20 in Ontario, or, the OMHA and the GTHL as well, because we got everyone back. We had a couple guys that were playing for the Toronto Marlies that came back, the Detroit Red Wings, these good teams in the city. And that was actually awesome. I remember those last like 2 years probably. So Bantam and in minor midget. It was fun. We had like a really good team that year, and in the OMHA league, I think it was pretty much us. York Simcoe was very good, obviously. Quinty was one of the top teams, and then Peterborough basically. So it was kind of like us four, and those years were a blast too. We were really good. And then my last year too, my draft year when I was 16 in minor hockey, I was the captain of the team. And it was good. It was fun, like playing for your hometown. Obviously, it was a little more travel for my parents, but it was those years were great. And yeah, I mean, there's really not much more I can say about those Ajax Pickering years. It was a blast. I really enjoyed playing there.
We obviously didn't play against each other because we're a couple years apart. But I remember like when I first started, I was in Peterborough, so I was in that. That travel. So it was like we had a close game, which was like Oshawa or Whitby, but then we had like the Markhams or the York Simcoes. And I remember like in Peterborough, it was fun for us at a young age because there was a rule in Peterborough that every game except for the away games to Lindsay, because Lindsay was like 30 minutes, we had to take a bus. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So at like 7 years old, like I feel like I'm in the OHL, like taking a bus to every game. Like your parents are coming. I think the parents loved it too because they're all in the back drinking beers and like
yeah, exactly,
having a good time.
That was always a rule with every Peterborough team, right?
Yeah. I think there was something happened to a team or a player when they were young, and I remember that but it was cool as a kid, as I said. But then obviously as you said, you end up staying there, and you guys were always a good team. And that minor midget year, you end up getting drafted to the Belleville Bulls, who aren't a team anymore. But at the time, you were 10th round there. And I'm just wondering, so at this point in your life, was it all in your head? Was it like I want to go OHL, like that's my like main focus after minor hockey?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, it's one that's kind of tough for me to really say if it was one thing or the other. If I could just go back a little bit to that 16 year, we were really good. I remember, I think we had like, I want to say anywhere, I don't want to missay this, but it was anywhere from like 6 to 10 kids on our team drafted that year. We had a really good team. And I remember that year too, we ended up losing. We got upset in the first round of Barrie in Game 5. It was a best 3 out of 5 series. And then when that happened, we never actually got a chance to get to the OHL Cup because we lost in the first round. They didn't let us in, unfortunately. So that was tough too. I think they said like a lot of kids on our team probably fell like 2-3 rounds basically because we didn't get that extra exposure at the end of the year too. But for me, getting drafted to Belleville, it was pretty surreal. It was awesome. I was very happy with that, with all the hard work he put in, growing up and stuff like that, to be able to get drafted in the OHL priority selection. And then with regards to wanting to play there, like immediately like, hey, I want to make the OHL. I was kind of flip-flopped, to be honest. Now if I could go back and look at it, I probably would have worked twice as hard to make the OHL as I did. I was always kind of flip-flop whether if I wanted to go to the States or not, because I remember when we were about 14 or 15, we did a couple trips. We went to Niagara University, and I remember we went to Michigan University to watch the Wolverines play. And I remember I just fell in love, like going to Michigan, like at that rink at the Yost Arena, and watching a game there. And then I kind of was like, a half part of me was kind of like, okay, I really want to play NCAA D1 after seeing that. But then when I got drafted, it was kind of like flip-flop too. Okay, I really want to do play in the OHL as well. So I really didn't have like a clear path of what I wanted to do. And then when I was 16, actually, so Belleville was kind of turning over that year. I think they went to the Mem Cup the year before with, they had a PK Subban, a bunch of different guys that were on that team, and they were kind of turning over like a new leaf, basically. They had a really good team, I believe, the year before. Sean Lalonde was there. I think Steve Silas. I want to say Tangrady was there. I could be, missaying that, or a couple of different guys that were there. And they actually, the next year they turned over a lot. but the rule was when you're 16, you can only sign 4 guys to the roster. So that year they already assigned the first round pick, the second round pick, the third round pick, and the fourth round pick. So that first year I knew I didn't have a chance, really to make the team. And then so it was really hard for me to say, going to camp was awesome. As a Belleville, there was a lot of history there at the time. But that first year I kind of knew I wasn't going to play for the Bulls anyways, but just going to camp and getting the experience was really cool at 16. And then, kind of going forward, I was still, it was weird for me. That's one big hockey, I wouldn't say mistake, but something I look back on where it was like, I kind of had my feet, on the fence basically, or I was kind of sitting on the fence, hey, do I want to really pursue, to go play NCAA Division I, or do I really want to make the OHL? And for me, that was kind of, at the time, I didn't really have a clear cut decision on what to do.
I remember like lots to talk about there. I remember that team. So the year before you got drafted, they went to the Mem Cup. Like it was in Kitchener.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I went to that. So I remember that team. I remember Mike Murphy with his yellow pads.
That's right. Mike Murphy. Yeah, he was there. Yeah.
Subban was there, Tangrady, all of them. So they had a really good team.
Yeah, Grubauer was the backup. I don't know if Bolesky was there at the time too as well. He might have been there. He might have been a little bit older. Yeah.
Could have been, but
yeah.
No, and then just like I thought it was cool to hear because at that young age, and I just remember like us growing up, the fact that you got to go see those NCAA games kind of probably opened your eyes to that path, where maybe if you hadn't, you would always have been just focused straight on, it's OHL. And it's good that teams do that. I think it's good to see both sides. And obviously it's easy to look back now and be like, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I think everyone has those. But like to your point with the maybe working harder, like, being more focused in training or whatever, I think that would have been good for both sides, because then it just, you obviously, and we're going to get to this, you end up going to play 5 years in the OJHL, so tier 2 junior. And maybe at that point, if you're maybe a little more dialed on and off the ice, it's opening doors, whether it's in the OHL, maybe after 1 or 2 years in tier 2 junior, or it's NCAA. So that's like a thing I think it's good for the young listeners to hear, is that, no matter what your goals are, no matter what path you feel like you got to go, you got to commit to it and make sure you put the work in on and off the ice.
Exactly. And that's the other big thing too, is some people don't realize is, at such a young age, when you're 16 years old and, it's like, okay, do I got to make a decision here? Do I want to play some exhibition games in the OHL and basically lose my eligibility? Or do I want to say, hey, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to, wait a year and basically keep all my options open, which again, both things can be good. Maybe you have a good, a couple exhibition games and a good showcase and, you're on their radar, or you sign, or you're going to be on the team next year. Or you could have a bad couple of games, you know what I mean? And everything falls off from there. And then your complete goal is, all right, I got to make the OHL. You know what I mean? I just basically ruined my chances at an NCAA scholarship, right? So it's kind of interesting, and I think it's tough for young kids too to kind of make a decision, at that age.
Yeah, I've always just said, like, there's obviously multiple factors, but I've said all along, if you're a top 5 round draft pick the OHL, then I think your chances of making it within the first 2 years are probably better than someone like yourself who was taken in a later round and obviously
for sure
at that time overlooked. But at the same time, there's so many factors. Like maybe you're a 10th rounder, but school isn't for you. So like you're not very good. And then it's just the OHL. Or maybe you're a 2nd rounder, but school is for you. And hey, thanks guys for drafting me, but I want to go NCAA. So obviously there's many things that go into it. Back to kind of your career. So as I said, you end up playing 5 years in the OJHL, 4 with Whitby. And then your last year, you end up going to Wellington. And for me, when I look at your career, I just see progression. And I think that's positive. Like you obviously were and there's nothing wrong with saying this. I think just maybe you were a late bloomer in terms of like the junior level. Every year you slowly getting better, but you weren't putting up those massive points at 16 that maybe some other kids were. But my question is, when every year you're progressing, feeling better in the league, getting to kind of know what type of player you are, what was the interest like from the outside? Like at that point, you know, when you're because you went at 16, so when you're like 18, 19, have you just like completely shut off? Okay, Belleville, for example, not gonna think about that anymore. And now it's time to focus on either CIS or NCAA.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Kind of a long story, but so when I was 16, actually, yeah, I got the chance to play junior A at the time in the OJHL. And I think the rule at the time, I don't know if the rules changed now, but it was you were only allowed two underagers, so two 16-year-olds at the time. So I mean, for me, I was very fortunate. You know, I think the situation I was put in was good for me. I got a chance to play as an underager, you know, in Whitby and get that junior experience right away at the first year. But however, you know, if I look back on it now, like we said, there's a lot of shoulda, woulda, coulda. I think that decision for me was probably a decision if I could go back on, I would change. I probably would have played that major midget year of minor hockey. And it's kind of goes with the old saying, you know, you gotta go where you're going to play to really excel, you know, especially at a young age. It's so important for these kids, you know, whether, you know, they're 12, 13, 14, if they're playing, you know, they're not playing much at the AAA level, they should be playing AA, you know, get more exposure, get better. And that was the thing for me with in Whippy that first year when I was 16. I honestly, just like, if I'm being completely honest, I just wasn't ready as a 16-year-old to jump into that league right away. I can't speak on what the league is like now, but looking back on that year, you know, playing against guys that are 18, 19, 20, like that was a pretty nasty league. There were some big boys in that league back in the day, as you know, you remember because you played in the same league. But you know, my speed just wasn't there at the time. I had everything else, all the toolboxes, but I couldn't keep up that year, really. If I look back on it, you know, I think I trained hard in the off season. I wasn't fast enough and I wasn't reading the game, you know, as quick. Whereas if I could go back on it, I actually would have played. I should have played that 16-year or 17-year major midget that first season. I think for me, my progression would have been a lot better because, you know, going into my 17 year, like you said, every year I did get better, and that was awesome to see. But I just felt like that 16 year was kind of like I almost hit a wall, if you know what I mean, where I really, you know, I did not excel that year. I was, you know, getting scratched and out of the lineup. You know, if I was playing fourth line minutes, you know, a couple skips a game. You know, there was times where I remember I would see the ice maybe once or twice, and then it would come to the third period, and there was no chance I was really touching the ice. So again, it kind of goes both ways. You know, it was good for me to get that exposure, I believe, at such a young age and play as an underager, 16 years old. But at the same time, you know, it was a tough year for me. It was long. You know, I felt, you know, not so much lonely, but you know, you're getting in your own head a lot. You know, you're not playing, and I think it's, you know, it's kind of cliche to say again, but like you're only going to get better if you're playing. You know, you're getting the minutes, the in-game minutes. You know, seeing the ice. You know, in a game situation. And for me that year, that was tough. It was definitely a long season, that 16-year-old year. But I think, like you said, that the progression did get better each year. You know, I don't think my 16, 17, 18 years in junior, I was ever, you know, a force out there, but I was playing like a good role, especially my 17 and 18-year-old year, kind of in a shutdown role. But yeah, that first year was tough for me. If I could go back, I would definitely, you know, do things differently.
Yeah, I mean, there was always that debate, and I feel like we came up in a weird time where they were still thinking the old school way, but also we're trying to integrate the new thinking. And what I mean by that is guys before us that played, it was if you had a chance at 16 to play junior C, junior B, junior A, you're doing it because it's better than going back and playing midget, and it'll give you that
Exactly.
exposure, which is true. It gives you exposure. But to your
Yeah.
credit, because you played your 16-year-old year for Whitby, and as you said, like even your second, third year, like you still weren't putting up a lot of points, but you're obviously put in a different role. But there could be an argument that says, hey, if I went back and played my midget year and played in all scenarios, played consistently, was able to work on my skills, grow my game, would I have been better to jump at 17 to junior versus, as you said, basically in and out of the lineup at 16. And I think for me, I think I know what I would do. Like, I would agree with you. I think it's better to play. I did that too. Instead of making the jump to junior, I went back to midget. I didn't get drafted. And because my goalie had gotten drafted, he was in the OHL the whole year, didn't really play a lot of games. And I was playing every midget game because we had one goalie. So it was perfect for my development. But at the same time, it also depends on your scenario, because so many people, like, you see it in the OHL, like they go at 16, they don't put up a lot of points that year, they get the exposure, but then they come back for that 17 year and that's their draft year. And a lot of these kids are putting up way more points, playing more time, and then they end up getting drafted. So I think it really depends on the person, but it takes, what I would say is that, like, looking back and for you to like be honest about it, like, I think that's a good message. And I think it takes a lot to be like, yeah, I enjoyed what I did, but at the same time, this might have been better. So when you end up playing those years, when did when was there starting to get interest for you from school? Like, had you always planned on, what, I'm going to play junior until I'm done, so till 21? Or was it, hey, if I get an offer, whether it's CIS, NCAA, like, how was that time for you? Like, were you talking to teams in both kind of school situations?
Yeah, that's a good question actually. So kind of going back to probably that 17-year-old season in Whitby. I didn't really have a great season in general, but I was playing like a good shutdown role, like a third line role. And I actually still had I still wasn't released from the OHL that year. I was still with Belleville, which was good for me. And then probably the end of that 17 year, I got a call back from Belleville because they had a couple spots available that next season. And I was excited at that point. Even if I missed my 16 and 17-year-old year, I thought, I was ready. I could jump in to the OHL at the age of 18. I felt faster. I felt like I was seeing the game better in junior. Even though I wasn't, producing a ton of points, but I knew what type of player I was at the time, and I thought I could fill a good role on that Belleville team going into my 18 year. And then it was just unfortunate circumstances, actually. It's kind of a crazy story, but that summer, I think I went to rookie camp. I did very well. And they were like, come back to main camp in shape, get ready and get going. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to have a big summer ahead of me, train, as hard as I can. And which I think I did, but then it was just like out of the blue, unfortunate. I ended up getting mono like in August. And like my body just got hit by a friggin' wall. Like I was done for like a month. And I think that camp ended up starting up again like late August for that main camp for Belleville. And when I went there and did my physical, they actually found out basically, like sometimes when you get mono, you can get really bad. And basically your spleen, I believe, hangs below your rib cage, essentially. And I actually, when I went there, I did my full physical. They did a full examination. I was actually like that time, I wasn't feeling good that whole month. I think I lost like 13 or 14 pounds and pale, white as a ghost all of August. And it was unfortunate. That was probably one of the toughest moments in my hockey career going back. They actually sent me home from main camp that year just because I wasn't even able to skate just because of my condition at the time. I wasn't feeling good. I wasn't in shape anymore. I was losing all this weight and everything. And that was tough for me, to be honest. That was kind of a cold moment, in the hockey career. And, but they ended up releasing me a couple of weeks later. So I was officially off, their radar and essentially a free agent in the OHL. But I knew kind of at that point, when you hit 18, that's pretty much the end of your chance to kind of get into the OHL. So I ended up going back to junior that year, playing for Whitby. Started feeling better in September. Started getting, I think I missed a couple games in September there early, but I started getting, back in the lineup, feeling good. And that year was, looking back on it, I guess it's, like I said, it was probably one of the, the crappiest moments of my hockey career, getting booted home from Belleville camp that year with a chance probably to make the OHL and, jump into a third or fourth line role and play a shutdown role. But that year in Whitby it turned out to be incredible for me. I had really good line mates at the time. I was a centerman. I was playing center. So I was playing like second or third line center, moving up and down kind of the lineup, playing a ton of minutes, playing good shutdown against, some of the top players in the league and the top teams. And that whole year, just kind of, our team just gelled. We had so many good players on that team. Devin Shore ended up being a second round draft pick of the Dallas Stars that year. He was incredible. We had good goaltending. Everyone was filling in roles. I wouldn't say we had any guys that really lit up the league, but we just kept rolling. And I remember in playoffs that year, it was funny because there's so many teams in the OJHL. I think we won our first series. It was best 3 out of 5. We won 3 straight, and then it started becoming 4 out of 7. And I think like through the round of 16, the quarterfinals and the semis, we rolled through everybody. Like it wasn't even close. I think that year going into the finals, so that 3 series, best 4 to 7s, and that 3 out of 5, we were like 15-2 going into the finals that year. And we were just like, we were loaded. Like our whole lineup, like all 4 lines were good. Our D were good. Our goaltending was really good. And then that final that year was a blast. We ended up playing Stouffville in the finals in my 18 junior year. Series kind of went back and forth a little bit. It was, I think, 1-1, and then it went 2-2. And then I remember game 5 in Stouffville, we lost. I think a pretty tight game, unfortunately. And then we were coming back to Whitby for game 6 against Stouffville at the time, and we actually ended up losing, I believe, in double overtime to Stouffville in the OJHL final. So that was tough. You get it go that far all that way, especially in the OJHL with the extra teams, right? You play that extra series. You're playing 5 rounds of playoff hockey, and to lose in the final like that was tough. And then to watch Stouffville go all the way to the RBC Cup and do well too, that was obviously a tough thing. But looking back on that 18 year, I think that's kind of really when I hit my stride, like as a player and in my role. I was playing really well. I was getting my strength back. I was stronger. I was seeing the game better, and I think that kind of really prepped me for my 19 and 20 year. Going into those last 2 years of junior hockey, where I was starting to see some interest from different schools, especially that 18 year. I remember at the showcases, I was doing well, playing a good role, and starting talking to some NCAA D1 schools, some D3 schools, and then rolling into my 19 year where, you only got 2 years left. You start talking to more schools, and you kind of realize, okay, maybe, after junior hockey, this isn't it for me. I can keep playing and eventually, go, whether it's the NCAA route, or at the time it was the CIS route through Canadian University. So I think that 18 year, looking back, yeah, it absolutely sucked. I wanted to play in the OHL so bad that off season for Belleville. But at the end of the day, it kind of worked out for me in the end, like kind of all the stars aligned, and we had a really good team in Whitby that year, going all the way to the finals. And, we had a lot of guys ended up getting scholarships that year, the 20-year-olds, whether it was NCAA D1, D3, or a couple guys went the CIS route as well. So, it kind of all worked out. And then, I pretty much had the 2 years left before I kind of went to school.
And at that point, like first of all, I just looked at that Stouffville team. So like a guy from Burlington, Christian Power, Powers played for them. I remember that he went there. The deadline, Drake Kajula was there.
Kajula was there. Yeah.
Yeah. They had a good team.
Yeah.
So now, as I said, like you're into those last 2 years of junior. At this point, like I want to kind of like hear like quickly, like where was your focus? Like, are you thinking D1 versus CIS USports, or were you thinking D1 and D3 / USports, or was your mind just, hey, I want to only do one thing? Or like, how was that for you? Because that's obviously a big decision for a lot of guys at this age is, do I still hold on to the D1 dream? Maybe I'm just a late bloomer and I'll get a scholarship that way, or should I start thinking about other avenues like D3 or USports?
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and it's so true what you just said. It's such a tough decision for a 20-year-old kid to kind of make that decision. I can only speak on my behalf and what I went through. For me, I was keeping all my options open that 20-year-old year. I remember I finished those 4 years in Whitby. I got the call that, I would potentially could be traded. And when they told me Wellington that year, I knew we were hosting, at the time it was called the Dudley Hewitt Cup, which was, I guess, the Central Canadian Junior Championships at the time. And then the winner would go to the RBC Cup, basically. So, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer for me, honestly. I think to go there and have the opportunity to play in Wellington that 20-year-old season. And, I wouldn't say we had the best team, but I think for me, it was finally a chance where I kind of got out of my shell a little bit. And, from when I was, 16 to 19, I was playing a different role. Whereas in Wellington, I was kind of the guy everyone looked up to. I was playing top line minutes, first line right wing. At the time, I moved over from center to play top line minutes, and I think that was a great decision for me. And that year, as it kind of went on, I started off, really well. I think I had like 17 goals in 17 games, and I was getting a lot of D1 interest at the time, from different schools, and obviously some D3 interest too, and some CIS interest. And then kind of as the year went on, our team kind of faded, and so did, our numbers as well, which is standard. So kind of going into, the end of the season, at the time, I was turning 21. And I think there was a rule back in the day too, where if, you turn 21, you have to be taking courses, I believe at the time to stay or go D1. I can't fully speak on that rule essentially, but, I started, I was just keeping all my options open at the time. For me, that 20-year-old year was a blast. I met some great people that year, some guys that, everyone billeted in Wellington too, which was cool. So, some of my best friends to this day, I still keep in contact with, my billet brother, at the time, Eric De Laurentiis. Me and him are still best friends to this day, which is awesome. My billet parents at the time, Debbie and Dan McGillivray, excuse me. They actually live in Peterborough now. I'm still in contact with them. I go and see them, as often as possible. We still text and message each other, whether it's by text message or on Facebook. And, my parents to this day are still good friends with my billet, and then my billet brother's parents as well. So I think that connection too was very cool that season. But like I said, as for me, I literally just kept all my options open. I didn't want to burn any bridges on either end. And then once the 20-year-old season ended, I made kind of a late decision, actually. It was probably like end of May, early June, where I had gone and visited, a bunch of different schools, went on a different recruiting trips, to the NCAA and to CIS schools, where I actually finally made my decision to play, CIS hockey. And I mean, I can probably speak on a little bit on my end too, where my parents at the time were kind of, I wouldn't say pushing me, but they were kind of told me the situation. Hey, if you don't get a Division I scholarship, fully paid for, mostly paid for, I think CIS is the best option, because, if you go CIS, it's obviously, it can be a lot cheaper for Canadians, right? You're not paying that international rate to go play D3 or even some D1 schools. They're not giving, full scholarships a lot anymore, whereas it can be, I wouldn't say a financial burden, but I mean, it's tough for parents, right? To fork out a lot of money to go to, these different schools in the States if you don't have a full ride paid for, right? So I think on my end, I made the right decision to go CIS, and I'm totally glad with that decision, to this day.
Yeah. So first, to talk about that rule, it probably might have changed by the time you were at it with the 21-year-old, but I remember my 1 year junior, our rival, the Oakville Blades, had a 21-year-old goalie, or a 20-year-old goalie, and they ended up going to the RBC. And I remember at the Dudley Hewitt, he played the first 3 games of the round robin, and then the other guy went in, who was actually the guy that was with me when I started in Burlington. And I was always like, well, that's weird. Like, maybe is he hurt? But I had found out the rule was, as
That's
soon as
right.
you
You
turn,
weren't allowed to play, right?
yeah,
As soon as you turn 21. Yeah. And that, I remember that being the rule. So I think the Dudley Hewitt at the time too was past my 21st birthday. So I
Yeah.
remember when I played that game, I knew I was done. Right. So
Which is
yeah,
unfortunate for those guys who have, D1 scholarships, because it's
yeah,
like, and I to be honest, I don't understand that rule. I think it's stupid. But
yeah,
anyways, so it forced them to change. So that was that. So I remember that from your side. And then just quickly about the financial side, like, let's just call it what it is. It is a burden. Like, it's
for sure. Yeah, yeah,
what you have to pay for D3. And when I transferred D3, they still had a package then, which was like an international package. So it was
yeah,
the
yeah.
Canadians could get a bit off. And I'm pretty sure the year that I transferred, they cut it after that. So you'd be grandfathered,
Oh,
but
really?
yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
anyone new, no chance. So like, like, let's be honest, like, I don't know what it was that you end up going to Nipissing, but like, you're probably in the range of 7 to 12,000 a year Canadian, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending what school you're going to, versus you're going to these other schools in the US. It's D3, unless you have an academic scholarship, meaning your grades are
yeah.
really good and you can get some money off. You're still paying anywhere between 30 to 50, and sometimes even more. And so I understand it
Exactly.
from your parents' perspective, because it's not even it's a burden for them in a sense, because they're obviously going to try to help you out, but it's also, I think, it's a burden for you, because if you can't, put a chunk down right away, or you're working full time in the summer just to pay that off, like, it does, these relief packages, like, they only go so far, and it does take you into a lot in your life. And even today, like we talked about, like, a side thing of houses being so expensive. Well, how are you supposed to, at 30 years old, be thinking about buying a house when you're still paying off how much is left of this D3 thing? So I understand it. And as I said, with everything, there's circumstances and different situations. But in the end, you end up going to Nipissing, play 4 years there. Um, I know you enjoyed your experience there. We've talked about it before. The one thing I wanted to talk to you about is, at the time of, like, when I was playing, and like, it was a choice between OHL/CIS versus NCAA, there was this stigma of CIS hockey. I know it's called USports now. At the time, it was called CIS.
Yep.
And I just wanted to talk to you about that. Like, how was the hockey in your experience? Like, were you guys at this time, were you still going through that stigma of like, oh, you play CIS, it's not that good of hockey, or was it finally transitioning? Because it only happened like recently, I feel like within the last 10 years.
That's actually such a great question, and something I was gonna touch on right away when you brought up Nipissing. So I to be honest, I had no idea what to expect going there. I didn't know what I was getting myself into with regards to the hockey part. How good it was. What type of players we had, where these guys were coming from. And to be honest, I still remember. I know we're jumping a little bit ahead here, but I'll go back. My fourth year, end of the year meeting, with my coaches, and we were kind of just, shooting the shit about, all 4 years of hockey. And I still remember to this day, my assistant coach looked at me and he says, Steven, like, this is the best hockey that nobody cares about or nobody watches, because it's a legit league. Like, I don't think people realize how good the hockey is, with regards to CIS and U Sports. Like, a lot of these teams, it's all ex OHL players, WHL players, major junior players that don't sign essentially NHL contracts and are using their school package. And then the rest of the team is rounded out basically with, other junior A players or other, lower end OHL players and or major junior players. And the hockey was literally awesome. Like, I don't think people realize how big, how fast this hockey actually is. So, I mean, especially looking back, that's one piece of advice I could give to young kids too. If you're going up through the ranks and something doesn't work out with you with regards to, if your dream is to go play NCAA D1 or D3 or whether it's, go to the States, you need to realize or just go watch a game how good and fast paced CIS hockey is and U Sports hockey. It is like super legit. To this day, it's some of the best hockey I've ever played. Again, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, and we'll get to that. But like, I remember, some of these teams, we would go down and play NCAA teams, and we would be right there or just as good. obviously the teams out east, the UNBs, the University of New Brunswicks, the Acadias, the St. FXs, they'd go down to the States and they would compete or beat, all these teams, the Boston colleges or whatever. And I still remember UNB. I mean, I don't know if this is fully true or not, but a couple of years, maybe not all 4 years, but they would play Binghamton at the time, the Senators, the American League farm team, and they would beat them pretty handily, right? So it sucks because you don't get that exposure from I guess like a network side of things. Whereas, in the States, you see all these NCAA D1 games now on, ESPN2 Plus or ESPN Plus or whatever. Whereas in Canada, it's really only the national championship is actually, promoted on TV, on TSN. But I mean, like, that's one thing I look back on and say, wow, everyone was the age of 21 to probably about 25, 26. Sometimes even guys were older, leaving the East Coast and then going to school or the American League, going back to get their education. They're 27, 28. And it was good hockey, especially on the Canadian ice. It was fast paced. It was big, a lot of hitting, a lot of contact. You had to make quick decisions with the puck. And that's one thing I'll remember too. Like it was fast. You had to think quickly when you had the puck. And I think that's a good message. Like I said, if I'm just repeating myself a little bit for a lot of these kids, if you can go out and watch a CIS or USports game and you don't know anything about it, or you don't think it's great hockey, like, your mind is going to change quickly. It is a really legit league.
No, I definitely agree. I've had a couple of people on that who've been that route, and I had a guy who was in college, I believe, in like 2004, 2005, and like he was on University of New Brunswick, and they won the 1 year. And like he said, back then there was a huge taint against it, I would say, as like, oh, you're going CIS, good luck, your career is over after that. And this guy went on to play 10 years in the top Austrian league as a goalie and had a really good career, and now works in real estate back in Toronto. So he did really well and was able to get above that. One thing I wanted to ask you, and this is honestly just came to my head as you were speaking, and I'm not going to pretend that I know this 100%, but at least when I would pay attention to stuff like this, go online and check game sheets. So I agree with you when you say the CIS is a lot better than people give it credit for. It's really fast hockey, obviously, and you just laid out the reasons why, because there's OHLers going there, there's top tier 2 junior guys going there, there's guys from NCAA who maybe their situation doesn't work out, they're transferring there, etc. Why do you think, and this is just your personal opinion, and why do you think it doesn't draw as well as NCAA? So like even these top teams, like, Carleton, New Brunswick, like, they're not getting the fans like most NCAA teams are getting, like, and I don't know if that's just because it's like part of the package when you go NCAA is like the students themselves even know, like, hey, like, we got to pick a sport, whether it's football, basketball, hockey, we're going to go support, create a kind of crazy, as you would know now, like European fan atmosphere with the drums and the bands and stuff. Because like CIS, like, I remember going to watch games at University of Guelph and they have like 100 people there. And I'm just trying to figure out like how the attendance is so varied from maybe school to school and how it compares to like NCAA.
That's such a great question. And I don't know if there's a right answer, but I could probably pick out a few things that come to mind for me right away. One thing that is big with regards to Canadian university sports, and you look at American campuses, they treat their sports like absolute royalty with regards to whether it's football, baseball, basketball. You got March Madness, even the hockey teams, they get a lot of credit. Whereas I find in Canada, it's just the athletics is there, and I'm sure a lot of schools have big budgets, but it's just fundamentally, it's not rooted for as well with regards to American fans, that where they take their sports so religiously, they have so many boosters. Whereas it's hard to find that in Canadian athletics with regards to CIS and USports. The other big problem too, I would say, is when you look at a lot of, athletics for universities, I believe it's starting to get better. But, even look at Nipissing, for example, where I went to go play hockey. I believe before I went there, they had a huge draw because they didn't have an OHL team. But I think a year or two before I went there, the North Bay Battalion came in and they immediately lost all their fans. And that was one thing. But the other thing too is when you look at Canadian athletics, with regards to campuses, university, a lot of these teams don't have an ice hockey rink on campus too. And that can be another big issue. With regards to Guelph, I get it. They have it right on campus. I still don't know why they don't draw fully, a ton of fans. It could just be because people aren't interested, or it's not, built up enough. But with regards to Nipissing, so our campus was kind of, up the hill, at the other side of town, whereas the rink was pretty much right downtown North Bay. So it was like it's hard to commute there for students unless they had good, transportation for them to take. So I think that's one thing I can speak on. But I mean, it's a great question. And I think, we kind of need more answers and people to kind of give their light on an opinion on, I believe, because it should be, it's never going to be as big as the NCAA in the States. I totally get it. But I believe there should be more, enthusiasm and attraction for students to go to these games, with regards to whether it's football, volleyball, any sport, basketball, you know what I mean? Because I mean, these athletes, especially at the CIS and USports level, they're good athletes. And like you said, there was always that stigma. Oh, you're going to play CIS hockey, USports, your career's done. You're getting your education, and you're going to work a 9 to 5 or find a job, and that's going to be the end of it. But I couldn't disagree more. Whereas you look at all these guys that are coming out now, I think it's slowly getting better of CIS and USports, whether it's any sport that they're going to play at, the professional level. So I think that's a great question. I don't really have the full answer on it, but those are just a couple things that I could probably speak on that are tough and maybe some need to change.
No, you raised good points. And as I said, I wasn't expecting a solution, but it's just, I said, it's always fascinated me. Like, I do agree. It'll never be as big as NCAA, just because of the nature of it. And, if anyone's listening, they've been to a Guelph game and there's been more than 200 people there at that time. Like, I'm sorry, it was just the games that I've seen. There didn't seem to be a lot of people there. But my point is, for example, let's just talk about these two teams. So let's talk about Nipissing and Guelph University. They both have OHL teams. These OHL teams draw well. And for me, it's
absolutely,
why is the focus so mainly on these OHL teams? Because some of these OHL kids, they might not get drafted. And after the 21-year-old year, they might go play for that university team. So why not someone you've spent years watching? Why not go support them as well? And that's just something that, I don't think there's any right answer. And it's something that I don't know if it'll ever change, but it was just always was curious in my head. I'm going to ask other people on who go CIS and kind of get their opinion as well. But it was a cool thought. But anyways, back to you and your career, because that's why we're here. So after Nipissing, you finish your 4 years of CIS hockey, and I'm sure in your head you're like, all right, 9 to 5, here I go. Just kidding. And this is like, you end up going to Germany and you've been there ever since. And I think there's obviously a unique reason why, and you were able to get your German passport, which is obviously huge for any hockey player. It doesn't matter what league you're playing in. And I just wanted to kind of go through that. So maybe there's younger generations out there listening who have some German descendants or German family and are curious to be like, how was your experience getting it? Did you have it from the beginning? Did you have to go through all the paperwork and stuff? And like for you also, when you went over, like, how was it adjusting to life in Germany? Because it obviously is different than North America.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was actually interesting. So it was after my 3rd year of university. I was going into my 4th year. My dad actually was able to get his a German passport through heritage, basically because my grandparents were German. My aunt was born in Germany, and then my Oma and Opa came over to Canada with my aunt, and then my dad was born. But the stars kind of aligned, whereas through heritage you were able to get your passport. And then we started kind of doing the research, maybe there's an avenue where I could go play hockey, kind of like after that 3rd year and halfway into my 4th year of university. And it kind of all just worked out. Like, for example, at Nipissing, I had my head coach was Mike McParland at the time. He was a very big name in Switzerland. I believe he has his Swiss passport as well, and so does his son. And then you kind of look at my assistant coaches I had around me too at the time was Mark Kostrick, who was a legendary player in Germany. I think he played in Germany for over 20 years, and he's actually German descent. So he's actually German. I believe his wife's German. I can fully speak to that. Mark, if your wife's not German, I'm sorry, but I believe so. But yeah, he was kind of the one that pushed me down that road. He was like, when I told him, hey, this is kind of, what I'm thinking. This is the potential for me to get my German citizenship and my passport, through my father. And I remember seeing like his eyes lit up. He's like, man, you pretty much have the golden ticket if you ever want to go play professional hockey, right? So it actually all worked out. Speaking to the process part, it was long. I'm not gonna lie. I think it took probably about 8 to 10 months from that start of that year, and I think I finally got it probably towards the end of my fourth year at university. There was a lot of paperwork that had to be filled out, a lot of documents that needed to be dug up. For example, my dad needed to have his first, which he did, which he got prior, which was nice, and to prove everything. So I actually just did that at the Toronto, the German consulate downtown Toronto. But it was a lot of, I think I went back there maybe 3 or 4 times, looking back on it now. And yeah, it actually all worked out. Like I ended up getting my passport, at the end of that fourth year. And then it was kind of interesting because I actually took accounting at university through Nipissing. That was my major. And at the time, I kind of had to make a decision. Okay, do I want to basically start a career in accounting, or do I want to kind of give this a shot and go play hockey in Germany? And that's kind of how it all started. And I made the decision to go overseas.
Just looking up your coaches while you were speaking, and I just realized that your assistant coach, so he is German, and he ended up playing with like my best friend's dad, played with Larry Mitchell, Mark
Yeah,
Mahone, all these guys. They played together in
yeah,
Vadermark, maybe some other places, but pretty crazy. And yeah,
yeah.
your head coach, obviously, long time in Switzerland, and obviously with the pass or the license there. I have some experience in that with Josh there having the license as well. But
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy how small the world is. I'd love to talk. Maybe one day I'll get these guys on and talk to them. But
It's interesting. You actually, if you ever get a chance, you should have Mark on. He's he's an interesting guy. He's been over there forever. He's got so many good stories. I think he played in a couple of those years, in Berlin when they were giving out crazy amounts of money and teams just going bankrupt left, right, and center. But yeah, he was a legend in Germany.
man, just so many people I've talked to like that are now coaches or GMs in Germany, and like it was normal every year to start a season, get paid a shit ton, and then by December, just know that
Yeah,
team's gonna go bankrupt and you got to switch. Like it was just a
yeah,
different world. But one other question I had for you. So I think this is another good point. So obviously,
yeah,
you got your pass, and you end up needing to pick an agent. So obviously, as we know, you're with Peter Meyer, who is also my agent with Sportagon. Um, I think for both of us, he's been great. But obviously, it's there's many agents out there, other guys in Germany that are doing just as well. Peter obviously has done well for himself too. But I'm just saying, there's other options out there. So I'm wondering, when did you start working with Peter, and how was the decision process for you? Because it is a big decision. Like, obviously you can switch throughout time, but like normally in a perfect world, I think you want to pick someone that you feel like represents you best and have them till the end. So I'm just wondering kind of your process between picking guys, because you having a pass. I'm sure that, he wasn't the only one reaching out to be like, hey, this is what I can do for you.
That's actually a good question. So it's interesting actually, because I originally, when I started to go over to Germany, or knew I had the chance to go over to Germany, I won't mention his name, but I actually had an agent prior to Peter, and he was actually originally my agent for my first 2 years while I was in Germany and the summer before. And when I started getting some interest, to be honest, I had no idea what it was like over in Europe, how it works. If I could go back, maybe I would have done a little more research, but now, being over for so long, you see the ways of how things work and how people recruit guys and the different agents over there. But at the time, I literally just had gotten in contact through a friend of a friend, and I eventually went with this guy as my agent. And it turns out funny story actually, he knew Lance Neathery at the time, when, again, another legendary player in Canada and in Germany. and he was the GM of the time of the Duisburg, the Fuchs of Duisburg in the Oberliga. And it turns out Lance had a house in North Bay on Lake Nipissing. And I was going for graduation, I want to say like in June, I was going back to North Bay. So me and Lance actually had lunch. We ended up hooking up there, having a lunch, eating, talking hockey or whatever. And I eventually decided to sign with Duisburg. Long story short, turns out, it's tough as a player. For example, like you want your agent obviously to reach out to you, if you have a question for him, if you hear something or you just have a general, a conversation about a topic that you're interested in or you want an answer to, and to get an answer. And I remember after my first year, it was tough for me. I couldn't get my agent on the phone. I understand to this day, he has a ton of players. We didn't really have a great connection in the first place. We were kind of just paired together as I went over to Germany. So that was that. And then I eventually left him. We mutually decided, to part ways, which was totally fine. I respected him for saying it's fine, and me too. And we have no bad blood to this day, but it was tough. And then I remember actually meeting Peter. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but just to answer your question, I'm meeting Peter my third year in Germany when I was in Selb. And I think for me too, when you look at an agent or someone, at the end of the day, you just want them to have your best interests and you want them to answer you. You know what I mean? If you have a question for them and you text them, you want them to answer back, whether it's a couple hours later. You don't want to have to wait 4 or 5 days to get a phone call back. And I remember having lunch with Peter. And for me, look at Sportagon Group and you look at Peter Meyer. He's done so much for me. He's been such a good guy. He's always a guy that will reach out to you before you reach out to him, which is nice. He has your best interest. He doesn't have as many players as a lot of these other agents do in Europe, right? So, he's not, dealing with, a lot of people. So, he's putting your best interest first. And I think the other thing too is, you look at Peter, like he's just a genuine, nice guy. And he's a guy I want to have a beer with, at a restaurant or a bar, right? And to have a conversation with. I think for me, that's a big thing, when you're trying to pick an agent, obviously, having an agent trying to find you a good club with a good salary is important. But at the end of the day, you almost want to consider your agent, a friend of yours, right? And I do consider Peter to be a friend of mine. He's a great guy. We can always bounce ideas off each other, or, if he calls me, during the season or, before the season or in the summer, I look at my phone call and it could be 30, 40 minutes at the time, right? Just talking, shooting the shit and just talking. So I think that's big, especially it's tough in this day and age. You look at a lot of people consider agents, I'm using the word essentially, right? Some guys, but I think for me, Peter's just been nothing but respectful, had my best interests. And he'll just tell me the truth straight up. Hey, if I'm looking for a contract, this team doesn't want you. Okay, thank you. Whereas other agents can kind of, beat around the bush, and that's not really what you want as a player. So I think, with regards to Sportagon, like you said, me and you have the same agent. I have nothing but good things to say about Peter. And I think for me, he's been a great decision with regards to playing pro in Germany and switching over to him.
This kind of turned into a plug for him, and I didn't mean it to, but it was.
I know I didn't mean it either, but I just, it was like a long story just to answer your question. Just because I had a lot of prior problems with agents, especially my last agent. So that was it was a tough time.
No, and I think it's a good experience to hear from him, because at the end of the day, you raised all the points that I think it doesn't matter. There's tons of good agents out there. That's a true fact. The three things that I would agree with you on is you want someone who's going to have your best interests, and that they're going to be calling teams, selling you appropriately. They're not going to oversell you to teams. They're not going to just message a team. Like I know, for example, I get emails and it's just a letter of, hey, I got this client. Let me know if you're interested. And it's like, there's nothing to it. And I like, for me, it doesn't give me the motivation to go like watch video on this guy. Like, hey, give me a call, give me a text. Let's talk about this player. Like, how is he? And then I'll do my research. But if it's just a name on a sheet, and I get agents are busy, then it just changes it. The second thing I think is, he's able to you're able to get a hold of him. And as you said, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, we got to talk for an hour every time that I want to reach out to you. But hey, did you do anything here? Can you let me know if this happens? And it's just, even if he's busy, it'll be a yep, sure, or yeah, I'll try, or like just anything to keep you in the loop. And then as the third thing, which you brought up, is he's honest. And I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of these guys, they try to beat on the bush at times instead of just being honest. Like, as you said, hey, Steven, I talked to this team. They have no interest in you right now. Okay, at least
Yeah.
you know. So at least in your
Yeah.
head, okay, that's off the list unless something changes. And I think that's the big thing, which is why I also went with him, and why, for anyone listening, if you're getting an agent, it doesn't matter what age it is. I think those are the three main things you want to look for in somebody. And as I said, there's many good agents out there, North America, Germany, Switzerland, whatever. They'll do the same things that Peter does. You just have to have that good relationship with them where it's kind of like a friendship, but also there's the business side, versus just, as you said, with your previous agent, you kind of got paired together and it was like a tough match to begin with, or just you guys had different ideas on how to do stuff. So, um, back to your hockey. So, like, as you said, you went over to Duisburg there. You played a couple of years in the Overleague, and I like, what one thing I wanted to talk about with you is just because you've been fortunate to be a part of a team that's won a championship. And
Mhm.
when you transition to Selb, so your third year of professional hockey, you go to Selb. And, obviously this is the COVID year, so you guys are playing without fans, but you guys end up winning the championship in the Overleague and getting promoted to the Del 2. Not sure if a lot of people would have thought that would have happened. You had the Videns, the Hanovers, the Rosenheims at this time, even Halle, like other teams that are spending a lot of more money than you guys. I just want you to kind of take us through like that year, how that was for you, and evidently like winning the championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Right from the beginning, it was it was an interesting start to the season, to say the least. I think I signed that year back in probably like middle of April, and kind of I think COVID started in that March. So that whole summer, I wasn't even sure if the season was going to go on. No one really knew, had any idea. And I remember, we got over to Germany, I believe, late August or middle of August. I can't remember exactly, but I remember we had a couple meetings with management and our whole team, and no one really knew even if the season was going to start, or what was going on, right? So that part was completely, it's almost mind blowing and interesting, because you're like, okay, I just flew all the way over here from Canada, to Germany to start training and practicing, and I don't even know if this season's going to start. Fast forward a couple weeks, they get everything figured out. They start, loosening the rules a little bit. We ended up having, I think for maybe one or two exhibition games, I don't know exactly, but we had, a certain amount of fans, whether it was 500 or 700. And then, I still remember, like, a couple weeks into the season, like a bunch of teams started getting COVID. Different players, and the quarantine rules, they were very strict at the time. It was automatic, 14 days for teams, and we just kept. It was kind of crazy. Like that whole season, I remember, like, when I talked to, and Nick Miglio at the time, I had just met him that year, but he ended up being one of my good friends, and still is to this day. And, Brad Snetzinger, the other Canadians and Americans, and even the German guys. And we're like, we just got so lucky that whole year. It's just, I felt like every team in our league that year ended up getting shut down for COVID, with players being sick, and our team just kept trucking. And it's not that, I mean, we did have a couple players that were sick and they tested, but everyone just kept testing negative. It was, to this day, like the whole season, like it was just negative, negative, negative. And we just kept going on runs. We had a great team that year. I think, I definitely, looking back on it, we definitely weren't the most skilled team, that's for sure, in the league, or had, we had some top players and some good players, but I think essentially we're just well balanced. And that was huge for us. Like, it just well balanced. We were very good on home ice that year. I think when I look back at that season, I think our first game was at home and we lost to Regensburg, the very first season game. I think we lost 3-2 to Regensburg. And then that weekend, I think we came back and beat Fusen in overtime. We were actually losing, and that was going to be like a weekend sweep of losses for us. And I think after we won that overtime game, everything just kind of clicked. It was like 2 or 3 games in the season. I don't think we lost another home game until, I want to say, second round of playoffs against Rosenheim. And that was the only home game we lost after the Regensburg game all season. Like, it was just, I think I don't want to say it was, we dominated the league, but we just, we ran through a lot of teams. And I think for me that year, it was good too, because I was put in a situation where my centerman was Lanny Gare, a Canadian German. And then I had Nick Miglio on the left wing. And that was kind of our top go-to line that year. And we kind of played, where me and Miglio would skate a lot. We were a fast style, whereas Lanny was, he was a little bit older and he was getting us the puck a lot, but we also played like a really hard North American style. And I thought that was really good for us. It kind of set the tone almost for everyone else on the team that, hey, our top line is, we got Nick Miglio, who won the most valuable player of the league that year. We got Lanny Gare, who, led the league in assists, I believe, that year. I had an injury that year for 10 weeks, but I was, putting up good numbers and getting, scoring and getting my points and running the power play. But it was also more, hey, we're not just like skilled in this league. We're going to run you over. And our forecheck that year was actually, it was a lot of fun, and you look at the European style compared to the Canadian style, with the big ice, I would say there's still contact, but there's not as much contact. With regards to the North American style, but we almost just play like a big North American heavy hitting style in Europe. And I think that year was awesome. Like, no one could stop us on the forecheck. So, I mean, with regards to the season, it was a blast. For me, I blew out my knee that year, actually in January, and I was able to come back, I think, early March. I think I got like 2 or 3 season games in before the end of the year. And then again, going into playoffs, I think we finished, second in the league that year, or second in the Overleaguer South that year. And again, you look on paper, everyone said, it's probably going to be Regensburg or the Rosenheims, right? Against, maybe Hanover. And it's the funny thing with playoffs, kind of the stars just have to align, it's just, who you get, how you play. And I think the first round we played Lindau. We ran them pretty good. I mean, they were a good team, but we still beat them 3 straight. And then we kind of went into that Rosenheim series, that second round. And I still remember, like, even to this day, I still talk to Nick and Lanny, a couple other guys about it. I think that second round of playoffs was probably the hardest series and the toughest series we played. At the time, it was only best 3 out of 5. And it went to game 5, and I think we won game 5, maybe 2-1 with like a late third period goal or like early third period goal. And then, we scored an empty netter. But that, honestly, if you look back at that series could have gone either way. Rosenheim could have beat us and they could have gone all the way. You know what I mean? And it was a flip flop of probably I thought the 2 best teams in the South that year, and probably the 2 best teams in the league. And then it just worked out. We went to, we ended up playing Regensburg. And we always matched up well against Regensburg that year. I felt like that year they weren't very, they didn't really play the playoff style hockey that we played. We were very physical on them, and we were able to shut down their top guys and their power play. So that was fun too. I think we beat them 3-1. And then of course the finals was a blast. That whole year everyone said, oh, it's going to be the Scorpions. Hanover's going to win. They got the best players. They got, at the time, maybe the most money, the biggest budget. But I mean, we just held true. Like, it was, we lost the first game in Hanover, never got down ourselves, came back to Selb, won the second game. And I think the third game, it was interesting. We drove all the way to Hanover and we got smoked. Like, the game wasn't even close. It was like 6-1. I don't even know, maybe 5-1. And it just wasn't pretty. And I think, like, even at the time, driving back to Selb, I think a lot of guys were still like, hey, like, we're still in this. Like, for me, for my personal belief and like what I can say about how I was thinking, I was actually never worried that final series, even though we were down 2-1. The only time I was a little worried, like I said, was in the second round against Rosenheim. And then we went back to Selb game 4, shut them down and won. And then of course, game 5 on the road in Hanover. And I mean, like they say, game 5 or a deciding game, game 7, anything can happen. And I think I remember we took a bus to Hanover the day before, stayed in a hotel. I think got there late, like didn't get a great sleep. I can remember like sleeping in a crappy hotel bed there. And I remember we had morning skate that day in Hanover, and it was like middle of May at the time. It might have been like May 8th or May 9th. And for people that don't know, so the Scorpions in Vitamark, they play in an outdoor arena basically, or it's half outdoors. And it was so hot that day. I think it was like 20, 25 degrees, not even kidding, like early May. And the ice was literally slush. Like we were doing morning skate and I was like stick handling a puck and the puck was just soaked. Like I was just like, there was water splashing everywhere. I couldn't believe we were going to have to play a hockey game later that night, in Hanover. But again, if you look at that game, like I think we went down 1-0 in that game, that final game. And then it was kind of cool. Like we just had guys, like everyone stepped up. Like it was just, we had 4 good lines. And I think, I can speak for, Richie in the situation at the time. He was coming back from injury and he was playing 4th line center at the time, or 4th line wing. And he had 2 goals in that final game for us, So that was huge. I just felt like guys chipped in at big moments, everyone, we didn't like in the playoffs, there wasn't like a clear cut, guy, that had, a couple points a game or was taking dominance. It was kind of everyone chipping in at the right times. Everyone was scoring big goals, making big plays. And I think, to that game, I remember like that the very last shift, it was kind of funny. It's a moment I'll never forget where we went out there and I remember blocking a shot from the point and I ended up chipping it out to Nick. And Mig skated down the left side and put it in the empty net. And I remember skating as fast. If you watch the video, I'm skating like full speed from like our zone, like all the way down the ice, chasing the empty net goal just in case it doesn't, go in the net. And I'm like ready to grab at the puck if it's like going to go to the outside of the net or not. And I ended up leaving it and it went in. And I just remember that moment, once we had the empty net goal to make it, I think it was 4-2 at the time. That that was it, and that was the ceiling point. And it was fun to win on the road too in Hanover. So like I said, there's not really much more to say about that season. It was special. I think like I said before, I don't think we had the best or the most skilled team, but I just think we were so well balanced from our first line to our 4th line. We pretty much rolled 4 lines that whole playoffs, whereas I think a lot of teams in the Oberliga can rarely do that in the regular season, right? So I think for us, that was a huge advantage.
Oh, you brought up a huge point there. Like I've said it to this day. Skilled teams are good during the season, but they're not going to win in playoffs because it's a different type of hockey. And like you said, you guys were 4 lines deep, and guys like Richie that had to take different roles because of injury, but he's still contributing. Like that's what you need to win, and evidently you guys had that, and that's probably the big reason why you guys won. And I've heard many stories about the party after the bus ride, everything. It was a lot of fun stuff, but that brought us to when we met each other. So obviously you guys went up to the Dell 2. We spent the past 2 seasons together. Now you've transitioned to Bad Tolls this year. I wanted to talk to you about kind of your recent concussion thing, but I feel like, to be quite honest, like we've been going pretty long. I feel like that's another topic of itself. And for me, it's like, this is where we could do a Steven Deeg part 2 sometime. So I'm going to skip that for now. And one day we'll be able to come back to it, plus the next couple of years of your career, and also touch more on the Dell 2 days. But I wanted to ask you 3 more questions. So first one is like, how long do you see yourself like playing for, and do you have any plans for after hockey?
That's a great question. I still don't have the full answer to it.
Should we get Brooklyn on here to ask?
Yeah,
she might be the real one.
If she was standing behind me right now, she'd probably be tapping on my shoulder saying, no more hockey. No, it for me, I think I'm at the point now where I'm going year by year. Obviously my last contract was 2 years and it ended. And this year I just signed a 1-year contract in Bad Tolls. And I think for me, if I kind of look at, my future plans with regards to hockey, I'm going to play this year, see how it goes. Just bet on myself for the 1 year. and then maybe another year after that. But again, at this time, I can't comment how long. It's probably just 1 or 2 more years for me. Probably 2 more years, and then kind of go from there. And then with regards to my future plans, I don't know. I honestly don't know where I see myself landing. I would love to get into something with regards to finance or maybe accounting, kind of what I took and enjoyed at school. So that's something I actually got to start looking into, gonna down that path. So again, we'll kind of see when I cross that road.
Keep playing, enjoy it while you can. That's all I'm gonna say there. Brooklyn, you can listen to this later, and
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll get an Instagram message. Last two, obviously I think I know the answer to this, but did you think you would have the kind of career you've had when you're looking back?
Not really, no, to be honest. I mean, I think I'm pretty lucky. It's funny. A lot of my buddies, I'm 30 years old now, and a lot of my best friends I grew up with, whether I was playing hockey with or not, and I see them, they're working in office jobs or different stuff, and they talk about, their work experience, and then they always just look at me and said, like, don't ever retire, or like, you're so lucky, right? So, I mean, I'm truly blessed. Like at the age of 30, I get to go to the rink every day and make a living, right, playing hockey. So looking back on it, no, I couldn't say. I mean, I'm going into my 6th year of professional hockey, and I'm very humbled for that. And I really don't take it for granted.
It's a good mindset to have, and yeah, like as I said, everyone who's not playing or stopped playing tells everyone else to keep playing, and I would agree with that. But there's obviously everyone has different decisions to make in life, and as you said, though, I think you've had a good career, being able to play in Germany, Brooklyn's been with you, experience that culture, get paid to do what you love. So that's great.
Yep.
Last one here. What is one piece of advice, or if you have a couple, multiple pieces of advice you would give your younger self or the younger generation? So if you're speaking to Steven Deeg at 16 years old, or kids in similar situations, what are one or a couple of things you would tell them to keep in mind?
That's a good question too. I would honestly say, for me, don't specifically focus 100% on hockey. And I know this kind of sounds crazy, but play a different array of sports growing up. You know what I mean? You see some of the best athletes nowadays, they're playing all these different sports. You know what I mean? The best hockey players, sometimes they're trying other things in the summer. Don't get too involved, from an age of, 8 to 12 years old. Play summer hockey 24/7. Go to hockey camps all the time. Play a different array of sports, honestly, with regards to growing up. You know what I mean? That's how you build better habits, actually, with regards to hockey and, picking up different sports. And then the other thing too is, like, if as long as you love the game, just keep playing and keep working hard. I mean, I think one thing I could go back and look on, I would probably work twice as hard from when I was 16 to 20 to, try and get to a higher level, quicker, faster, and be stronger. So, I mean, like I said, the one biggest thing is, play a different array of sports. If you're 8 to 12 years old, don't spend 24/7 playing hockey, because you might get sick of it. If it's the summertime, play some baseball like I did, or other sports. Get involved in some other sports. It'll make you a better athlete and a better hockey player at the end of the day. And the other thing too, as long as you love it, you want to be in the best situation you can. So you want to go somewhere where you play. And if you do truly love it and you want to keep playing and you want to get better and you want to make it to a high level, then you got to do the extra work. You can't just put in a half-ass effort. All these kids nowadays are so good. They're working harder. They're getting stronger. They're getting faster. They're doing more conditioning. They're doing more, weightlifting, at a young age. So if you truly do love it and you want to go play a higher level, you can't half-ass it.
No, you raised a lot of good points there. I mean, last week's guest said the same thing. Multiple sports, it really does benefit you. And then, as you said, you got to work hard. And I think there's a saying, don't quote me directly, but it's like, talent or hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So like, talent can only get you so far, basically. And the guys who put in the work are going to eventually catch you and probably outlast you. So definitely some good advice. I know you got to get going. So I appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, as I said, I'd love to do another one. We'll talk when you're done, maybe somewhere accounting or in the real world, and we can talk about the rest of your career, as well as what I wanted to talk about too, with the kind of concussions and just bringing awareness to it, because obviously recently you went through something that was pretty hard, but now I'm happy you're well. And again, Deeger, I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Much appreciated. And then, yeah, we should do another one and tell you some better stories, hopefully, when I'm retired.
Something won't get you in trouble. Perfect, man. Well, again, thank
Yeah.
you for those listening. Appreciate you guys as always. Until next time, cheers and ciao.